While the cabinet here discussed the situation on Ukraine's border with Russia today after reports of a Russian troop build-up increased concerns about a possible invasion, the Prime Minister said that the UK would continue to support the territorial integrity of Ukraine and also reaffirmed the UK's opposition to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline that would bypass Ukraine and would pipe Russian gas directly to the European Union. Well, joining me now is Vadym Prystaiko, Ukraine's ambassador to the UK. A very good evening to you, Mr. Ambassador. Well, first of all, give us the overview, Ukraine's assessment of the situation on that border, the Russian troop build-up. I know your foreign minister is describing a seriously deteriorating situation. We're also hearing of Russian tanks being prepared at railheads further back from the border in preparation to be being moved there. Your assessment, please.
Thank you. I agree with you. There are two processes, seem to be independent, but there is a plot behind it. First of all, the thousands of people found themselves in landlocked Belarus from somewhere else and knocking at the door of the European Union. So the question is how they got there and what sort of pictures we will see in frozen forests of Belarus next to the Poland borders, all these kids, everybody else who is now waiting until being allowed into. And second, this process of Russia's been massing the troops around our border. Now their numbers are dangerous. It's not death and life yet. Ukrainians can, after 7 years of war, can put up a real fight, but this is going to be very, very dangerous for us. Especially these troops which been armored with the newest Russian tanks from Moscow region, how they get here and why they stay here over the winter. This is a big question.
Well, how serious could it get then? I mean, we are talking potentially, are we, about another invasion, about armed conflict?
Unfortunately, we can't exclude this option too. We hope that with everybody's effort, we will be able to de-escalate. That's what your Prime Minister asked, that's what the Secretary General of Nato, everybody else did. The CIA chief went to Moscow to talk to the leadership directly. We hope that after all these efforts, we will be able to de-escalate. The problem is that they stayed in Belarus, which they are more or less formally and informally occupied already. There is a new addition to Russia, and unfortunately we share 1,110 kilometers of the border.
So you see the two issues as linked, the situation on Belarus and the Polish border. Is this a hybrid operation by Russia? Because, of course, that could be stopped, one imagines, the situation in Belarus, if President Putin wanted it to.
For sure. We've been tried with green little men, as we call them, in Crimea. Poles now with the immigrants. Innocent people being used and played by Putin and by Lukashenko.
So how important is it to Ukraine, the support of the European Union, the support of the UK? We know that our Defence Minister, our Secretary of State for Defence, has been in Ukraine today.
He just finished the conversations with my president, and I understand that everything we are discussing right now with you, that's what our leaders discussed as well. On top of real steps is not just conversations. We just announced that we signed 1.7 billion defense contract with you. So it's not about just jobs, but both jobs will be created on both sides in Ukraine and here. But we're also talking about real assistance of Great Britain to help Ukraine withstand this pressure with Russians.
1.7 billion arms contract.
Yes.
There is a danger, though, is there not, that could further enrage Russia and President Putin?
It's not enough for us to withstand all the pressure, but I believe that the situation is opposite. The more prepared we are to be real strong and stay for our principles, is not that way all of us share.
So what would you, let's explore the possibility of a further Russian incursion into Ukrainian territory. What response would Ukraine expect from NATO countries and those countries within the European Union that aren't members of NATO?
As you know, we are not member yet. We are knocking at the door for the last 30 years. We are not allowed yet in. But I believe that there is time when our partners, we are not allies, can call our friends allies, but at least partners within NATO would understand how dangerous is that. It's not further away as Afghanistan. It's not your boys are going anywhere, but this is somewhere very close to the doors of the European Union. What we see right now with Poland. Who would expect that Russia would go with all the force, but they found another way, of hybrid way of getting into. And I believe that what they're doing on the Poland borders, they're just distracting attention of the European Union, which creates the opportunity, the window opportunity for them to knock at our door.
But I'm trying to find out, would you have an expectation if substantial Russian forces move across that border to grab more Ukrainian land, would you expect an armed response from NATO members?
We can expect the Ukrainians will fight to the death. We hope that some response will come, not just gravier sort of words or even sanctions, because we see the sanctions have not stopped them for a 7 years war, but something more substantial. And we are now within this contract with the Americans. We are receiving real weapons which will allow us to fight and withstand immediate pressure. We'll buy some time until the world will decide what to do with a dictator named Putin.
OK, but you're hearing these words from the European Union, from the United Kingdom, from the United States, of course. But are you in Ukraine scarred by the experience of the annexation of Crimea by President Putin back in 2014, when we heard the same denunciations coming from your allies in the West, and in the end, President Putin managed that virtually unopposed?
I agree with you, but somebody at that time believed that what we're trying to avoid third world war, which we hope that Russians would understand too, because they also are part of this society. They live on the same planet. What we now see that after 7 years, the sanctions, good words, bad words, didn't stop him from going further. What is needed now, we believe, that's more direct approach. It means that somebody, and I'm not that much looking at the European Union now, rather than NATO, will be able to really stand with us.
That is very worrying language, a very worrying expression you use there, Mr. Ambassador. Third World War. Are you serious about that?
I believe the part of the world was serious about 7 years ago. With us being where they are now and with the rest of the world being prepared now, I believe that we can avoid this.
And what role does the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, just to explain to our audience, this is the huge pipeline, it's been many years in construction, which in effect bypasses Ukraine, would take Russian gas, much needed Russian gas, directly to the European Union. It's built, it hasn't been approved, and we are told now that that approval has been suspended. You would see that as a positive move, I imagine.
It is a good move, but unfortunately this is in rather technical sort of terms. They can be playing for some time, but if it is just technical, it won't resolve everything. What I'm here to say that Ukrainian pipeline could provide European Union, all the European nations, with the gas easily. We have enough capacity for the Russians are doing this. It's just rather weaponizing the gas.
But do you think this is the play by Russia to get that pipeline approved, and then perhaps they'd back off?
Obviously, they will use this gas. They won't use Ukrainian pipeline, which will untie their hands in Ukrainian campaign, which is yet another risk in really military invasion.
Are you worried about the German attitude to this? I mean, the pipeline, in the main, will start supplying Germany. We hear that outgoing Chancellor Angela Merkel has continuing decent relations, let's say that, with the Kremlin, and that in actual fact has overridden President Biden in his opposition to Nord Stream 2.
I am worrying because the Germans were not understanding for all these years and years. They tried it before. I remember the predecessor of Madame Merkel, who promised to help us with that, but then became a deputy chief of Gazprom himself. So when we are talking about Germans, we have to understand how closely they're connected economically to Russians, and how much in their calculations of what is going on in neighborhood is dependent actually on the Russian gas or something else from the Russian Federation.
And we hear that Chancellor Merkel has also been speaking to illegal President Lukashenko in Belarus. Do you think that's a wise idea, to engage with that regime?
She's a great leader. I don't suspect that she is naive, but when she's asking Putin to influence Lukashenko not to do this is naivety.
And what is the mood amongst the people of Ukraine at the moment? Is there fear on the streets?
Not that much. People get quite accustomed, which is bad, again, after 7 years of war and 13,000 people killed. So people get used to listen to the TV like yours and finding out that yet another soldier been killed today, which is not great, but people can withstand this pressure. At least what Putin is trying to do, we are not changing our foreign policy course, as you may see. We're still going to European Union and NATO. We're still trying to introduce the same values you have here.
And would you say that the UK is taking a stronger line than, for instance, Germany in supporting Ukraine, particularly the words we heard last night, we've heard them again today from the Prime Minister, about Nord Stream 2 and about the integrity of Ukrainian territory?
Look, after in the 4 days, you have your Minister of Foreign Affairs, your Prime Minister, your Chief of Defense speaking about this openly in the Parliament. We have your Secretary of State for Defense coming to Ukraine just in 4 days. We have this contract, 1.7 biggest. I don't know when was the biggest contract been signed here on defense. All of the things together, this is something which I don't even have as a foreign ambassador to give a hint to tell you that yes, United Kingdom is doing much more than many, many others. I can put in this here in the line maybe Americans. That's more or less the core of the group which is supporting. I don't want to downplay the European efforts. Without the help, assistance, financial assistance, we won't be able to put up this fight. But if we are talking about real actions, this is two major partners where we can depend right now.
And just finally, we're nearly out of time, Mr. Ambassador. Give me your assessment then, your assessment of just how dangerous the situation is, because Russia has built up forces on your border before, and it's been building up these forces since at least the spring. Your assessment then of how likely any conflict is? 200
kilometers from us, 2-3 days maximum for the tanks. That's how close the danger is.
And that's all we know so far. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for coming in to talk to us on Sky News tonight. Vadym Prystaiko.